Hey guys, so today we'll be creating a pixel perfect camera in GameMaker Studio 2. So here I opened up a new project, and so far all I've done is import a sprite. So I'm going to open up the room, the default room here. Now I'm going to create an asset layer. I'm going to put the sprite at the top left corner. Now I'm going to run the game with just doing this, so you guys can see how GameMaker displays the game by default. So here we have the entire room in the view. Our sprite is like a 1-to-1 ratio of the size, so it's exactly the size I imported in, which is very small, tiny. I think it's 64 by 64 or 32 by 32, sorry. And we can barely see anything. So by the end of this tutorial we'll have a camera that will upscale our game and make it pixel perfect at the same time. So the first thing we'll do is create a new script here. I'm going to rename it to init game. Now I'm going to create some global variables. First one will be global.gamewidth. I'm going to set it to 384. Second one will be global.gameHeight. I'm going to set it to 216. Third will be global.zoom. I'm going to set it to 1. Last will be global.resolution. I'm going to also set that to 1. I'll explain these last two later. So now that we've initialized our global variables, we're going to make a new object. Let's just call it camera. Let's open up a create event here. Now for our create event, I'm going to create a variable called camera. And I'm going to do camera underscore create, so that way I create a new camera inside the variable camera. And I'm going to do VM, which this will be our view matrix. So I'm going to do matrix underscore build underscore look at. Now if you middle click the function here, it's going to open up the GameMaker Studio documentation. If you don't know what a matrix is, it's basically, it looks like this. It's just a bunch of numbers in rows and columns. So we're going to fill up this view matrix. If we check out the bottom here of the window, it's asking for the X from, which is the X position of our camera. We're going to set it to 0, the Y position 0, and the Z position. Basically Z is for 3D games, so since we're 2D it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to set it to the GameMaker default, which is -10. Do -10. Now the X2, which is the direction the camera is looking to, set it to 0, Y0, Z0. Now the X up, I'm going to set it to 0. I want the Y axis to be the up axis, so I'm going to set that to 1. And then Z is 0. I'm going to create another variable called PM, which will be our projection matrix. Let's do matrix build projection and then ortho. Now if you middle click here, you can see the difference between an orthographic projection and a perspective projection. So perspective is more for 3D games. Again, we're doing 2D. So we're going to go with orthographic. So it's asking for the width into global.gamewidth, and then for the height, global.gameHeight. The Z near, that really has to do with 3D, so I'm just going to set it to the default the GameMaker has in the documentation, which is 1 and 3200. 1, 3200, and close out that function. So here all we've done is we've created a camera, made a view matrix, and made a projection matrix. So now let's get a begin step event here. Now we're going to check if our view is not enabled. Now the reason I'm checking if it's not enabled, if we open up our room here and we go to the bottom left, you can see viewports and cameras. By default, views are not enabled every time you make a new room, so instead of having to enable that and then enable all these sizes here every time you create a new room in your game, we're going to do it via code, so it automatically does that for you. So we're checking if it's not enabled, and we're gonna set the size of our viewports. So we're gonna do view, set, zoom in so you guys can see, view set W port, which is our width. So we're gonna do 0, which is our first viewport. I'm gonna do it to global.game width. I'm gonna do view set H port, which is our height, global.game height. And then we're going to make this view actually visible. So view set visible and set it to true. Now we created the camera and both view matrix and projection matrix, but we never set these to the camera. So let's do that. So we're going to do camera set view mat and set it to our camera, and then VM. Now we're going to do the same with the projection matrix. So camera set projection mat camera PM, and now we have to assign the camera to a view. So we're going to do view camera 0 equals camera. And now that we've done all this, now we have to actually enable the view. So we're going to do view enabled equals true. So now that we have all that set up, now we have to actually run the script and then create an instance of our camera. So let's go back to room 0. Let's go to the creation code. We're gonna first run our script, init game, then we're gonna create an instance of our camera. So instance create depth 0, 0, because the position of our camera doesn't matter, depth 99, just because, and then the actual camera. So now we're running the script, we're creating an instance of our camera. So that's all we need to do here. So now if we run our game, you can see we're still at the same window size, but now our sprite looks kind of squished, and the reason for that is because the GameMaker it made the view and it's at the size that we want it to be, but it's since the game window is set to this size by default, it's squishing or stretching the view to fit the window. So now we have to adjust the size of our game window. So we're going to do another if statement here. We're going to grab the window width. So window underscore get width. If it does not equal global.game width times global.zoom, and window underscore get height does not equal global.game height times global.zoom. We're going to run some code. Now what we have to do is actually change the game window. So we're going to do window set size global.game width times global.zoom global.game height times global.zoom. So now if we run our game, as you can see, our game window has now been changed to 384 by 216, but our sprite is still kind of squished, and that is because of the application surface. So we're going to do surface underscore resize. Now if you don't know what surfaces are, we're going to middle mouse click that to open up the documentation, click surfaces. Basically what this says is that GameMaker doesn't draw the game to the screen, instead it draws to a surface, which is like a canvas, and then it just displays the canvas or surface on the screen. So by default it draws to an application surface, and now we have to resize that to fit onto our game window. So we're going to surface resize the application surface to global.gameWidth times global.resolution global.gameHeight times global.resolution. So now if we run our game here, you can see the sprite doesn't look stretched or squished anymore. It looks exactly like it should, but this game window is obviously too small to really tell. So what we're going to do is go back to your init game script and adjust the zoom to 2. Run the game. And there we go, we've now doubled the size of our window, and it stretches the application surface to match the window size. Now let's, we could also set it to 3. See, it's pretty big here. You can see our sprite perfectly. Now, one other thing, I'm going to open up a draw GUI event here. Now, you don't have to do this, but if we do draw text, let's do hello world. Now, if we run our game, you can see our sprite looks pixely, but the text doesn't seem to really match the size of our sprite. What I mean by that is, like, the text is high resolution, it doesn't look pixely, which means our GUI layer is a lot bigger resolution than our game layer. By default, I think GameMaker just sets the GUI resolution to be whatever the window size is. So we're going to go into here, create a new line, and we're going to do display set GUI size global.gameWidth global.gameHeight. We run the game. There you go, you see now hello world, and our GUI layer is set to the same resolution as our game. So that's it, guys. You now have a pixel perfect camera, and now you no longer have to set the viewports and everything in every room. Make sure for your camera to either spawn an instance of the camera in every single room, or you can just spawn it in the beginning in your first room, and then make sure you set persistent to be on here, so that way your camera's object stays running even if you switch rooms. So that's it. If you guys like the video, please subscribe, and if you guys could consider pledging to my Patreon, that'll help me immensely with everything. Thank you so much.